I am Sophie Goodman. I'm an applied anthropologist. I'm working in customer experience strategy and service design, both as a freelancer and more recently for a global digital consulting firm. I have worked across industries and for the last 6 or so years, primarily worked in financial services and government. So type of financial services projects that I'd be doing are things like Australia's new payments platform, infrastructure, digital business banking for small to medium businesses, financial advice products and services, retirement and superannuation. And now I'm happily freelancing again with a focus on ethnographic futures and design ethics. As a summary, first off, the ethical dilemma question that I had centered on the click to agree issue of product and service terms and conditions. Basically, whether we're happy to take a quick digital click as having read and understood terms and conditions. It involved a microloan product for underbanked or low income populations that had potentially mutually beneficial outcomes for both the company and the customer. In the scenario, I had that web analytics showed that these customers aren't reading the terms and conditions of the credit product, and therefore suggesting that they aren't aware or understand the financial commitment and implications that they're making. I also had this set against a scene of familiar KPI and reporting pressures. So to meet a sales target for the quarter, a quick decision is needed about whether to proceed with a marketing campaign targeting those exact same customers that web analytics showed weren't reading the terms and conditions. So why I chose that question, I had a couple of starting points that I thought were interesting scenarios to sort of see if I could get a question in there around that succinctly. So it was, is it ethical to sell a product where there's good evidence that a customer doesn't understand it? As well as what are the ethics of providing services to people with low or irregular incomes, and should that differ? And I also wanted to, because I'm an anthropologist and love the everyday aspect of things and why we do what we do, you know, habits and just the everydayness of life, I wanted to look at an everyday kind of ethical situation and challenge. So, and something that we don't notice or give much consideration to, I think, are the terms and conditions, definitely in digital channels. And also perhaps the role of business metrics guiding behaviour as a little bit of a sub theme in there. And just in terms of just a couple of other comments on that, on the terms and conditions, and where I'm coming from with that is that I'm wondering if we're indifferent to them and indifferent to the process of it. So are we resolved to it being a process that's actually quite unuser friendly? As opposed to everything else that is actually in a customer journey. So almost 4 years ago, in terms of reading up around this, almost 4 years ago, there was a Guardian article and they posed the question of whether it's customers failing in their duty to read and understand the terms and conditions, or whether companies are actually assigning an impossible task. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to sort of try and pull apart as well. And I did have a little quote that I want to share with you as well, which was a study done by 2 law professors who reviewed the terms and conditions of 500 of the most popular US websites. And they concluded that, and this is their quote, while consumers are legally expected or presumed to read their contracts, businesses are not required to write readable ones. So I wanted to investigate that a little bit further, whether people thought this was fair and ethical around a current everyday situation, or whether this should change. So yes, why I thought people would say that they would proceed with the campaign. This was the less popular response on average, but why they'd vote yes. So you're doing your job, and part of it is requiring that you reach those KPIs for your role. You assume that customers are getting an understanding possibly from elsewhere in the customer journey, even though this was a digital product and said that, but they may have missed that detail because there was a lot of information coming at them. So, or maybe you voted yes because you thought you'd run the campaign for this quarter and maybe look into it for the next one. Legally, you're covered. When we said that in the scenario that it's legally compliant to those terms and conditions, so maybe it's fine and you should proceed as normal. You thought you have a responsibility to shareholders to help the business perform well. Marketing customers doesn't guarantee that they will sign up. So there's distance between your action in enabling the campaign and the customers, actually, whether they sign up or not. And you also, or you could believe that the product is beneficial to customers, which it was set up to be. Why people might have voted no is to not proceed with the marketing campaign targeting those customers. If customers may be unable to make the repayments because they're not understanding their full obligations and because they are underbanked customers. So in which case you could assume that they are less knowledgeable about how this world works, or how these products at least work. And that may end up putting them under financial strain, emotional distress, and essentially causing harm. Or you also might have thought about additional care should have been taken with these vulnerable groups, and it's with the company's responsibility to make sure that they understand. So less on the customer, more on the company. Or just because something is legally compliant doesn't mean that it's ethical. So maybe separating those out. It won't be good for the business in the long run if customers cannot repay. And it could also pose a risk for the company from a brand reputation or a regulatory perspective. That rationale that I just went through was what I said at the time, that I was actually more interested than predicting an answer, yes or no. But I did think that conference attendees would steer towards the no vote, and they did, with 65% overall voting to not proceed with the marketing campaign. So to me, that showed at a high level, it showed that people working in banks know what is a more ethical decision to make when we're thinking of the customer. And that the findings, perhaps for me, initially really screamed out that it was about a typical knowing doing gap, perhaps, or more to the point for me, about the difference between what we say and what we actually do. Because I have not seen amazing examples of terms and conditions in terms of writing of them in a really user-friendly way, or the actual experience being actually designed around it. By country, the US and Singapore recorded the highest no votes against proceeding with the campaign. Belgium voted more yes to proceed with the campaign, but that was still around 54%. So it's not like, it's not like the US, which was 100%, and Singapore, which was 88%. And India and Greece were divided 50-50. Sales, product management, innovation, and marketing all record some of the highest no responses. So at 77% up to 100%. I'm wondering if that's because they are possibly those types of functions that are closer to the customer. So maybe that's why they voted that way. Interestingly, IT, operations, and business development / strategy had the lowest no votes. So they were more inclined to release the campaign. Firstly, I'd be wanting to ask people, have they ever found themselves in this type of situation, something very similar to it? I'd love some of those examples and some of the stories around it. So when has customer understanding of terms and conditions been tested, for example, as part of products and services? The second question that I'd want to ask for the yes and the no votes was, what was your rationale? Obviously, getting behind some of those whys. Then thirdly, I'd ask, how likely is it for the organisation to support your decision? Because I want to know, will it actually happen? I'd love to know, are people speaking up about this sort of stuff? Are they seeing it? So we've sort of found from that first question that we asked, I think that we found that people, this is a situation, or this is a scenario that people are sort of paying attention to, So then now what? Where's the action going to come from?